What is up, everybody? Welcome back to part 2 of Wrecking Crew, Demolishing the Case Against Stephen Avery by John Farrick. His story on the Stephen Avery case. It is a very, very good book. I highly recommend you picking it up. I got it on Amazon. That seems to be the easiest place to purchase it. So if you're interested in making a murderer, if you're interested in the Stephen Avery case, I highly recommend picking this book up. John starts out by talking about how Kathleen Zellner can prove Ken Kratz's timeline of events is false. John talks about how the cell tower pings proved that Teresa Halbach left the Avery property around 2:35 p.m. on October 31st. She turned left on Highway 147. She traveled for a mile, went south at the intersection on County Road Q. And then John believes that Teresa Halbach was killed shortly after around Cuss Road. Bobby Dassey told police he left for work at 9:30 p.m. that night on Halloween, which is 7 hours after Bobby was watching Teresa Halbach from his window. John talks about how the cops talked about how they didn't couldn't, this is really interesting that they brought this up during Bobby Dassey's interview, that they didn't or couldn't plant evidence in the case because they were cops. And if they did, they couldn't go to court, and they wouldn't do it because they had families, etc., and it would be embarrassing to them. They told Bobby, like, that's an extremely weird thing to say during someone's interview. I mean, I guess I understand why they are telling him this. They want him to believe everything that they are saying. They want him to believe their narrative of events, and they ultimately want him to agree with their narrative events so he would testify for them in court, which he did. But also, for the record, Bobby Dassey didn't have an attorney present either. Sure, he's 19, he's an adult, but he still should have had legal representation unless he was allegedly told beforehand, you're not going to need it. We want Stephen Avery for this. Don't worry about it. Just go along with us and you'll be fine. Allegedly. Pretrial publicity against Stephen Avery, painting him as a murderer, was huge. There's absolutely no way he was ever going to get a fair trial at that point in time because everybody had already labeled him guilty. Just look at the press conference that Ken Kratz held. But now, years later, so many people think that Stephen Avery and Brendan Dassey are innocent, that they were framed, and there's one big thing out there. What was the motive for their killing? There's always a motive, even for a random killing. I wanted the money, I wanted her watch, I wanted his car, I wanted something. There's always a motive. But Stephen Avery and Brendan Dassey had no motive. Stephen Avery at least had a lot to lose. A lot being $36 million. John talks about how Kathleen Zellner at the time presented court with new evidence that pointed at Scott Taddick and Bobby Dassey. Talked about Brian Dassey's statement about his brother, and he also talked about how Barb tried to remove relevant evidence from the Dassey computer before it was seized on April 21st, 2006. Talks about how on the day after Stephen Avery was arrested, they found a letter 30 miles north at the Green Bay post office, but it wasn't in an envelope. It had no stamp. But when it was read, it stated that a body was burned inside an aluminum smelter at 3 a.m. on Friday morning. The note was signed Sikikey. The police chose to downplay the letter and its relevance. Later, it was found out the letter came from the Manitowoc County, Two Rivers, or Green Bay area. The letter would be held at the Green Bay Police Department. John states there was no stories published about the burned bones until after the letter was received. Scott Taddick's, this is where it gets interesting, Scott Taddick's nickname at his work was skinny, but it was stated that a lot of people at that job couldn't read or could barely read, had a very low level intelligence. The letter was written in both in both cursive and printing, but Scott's nickname at work was Skinny. So a lot of people out there think that S-I-K-I-K-E-Y is just somebody misspelling the word skinny and trying to inform somebody that Scott Tadek was one of the people behind this crime, allegedly. So, some very interesting pages in John Ferrick's book, Wrecking Crew. That's where I'm going to end part 2. Very interesting book. Pick it up on Amazon. I highly recommend it. It is a very good read. I hope you're all having a great day, and I'll see you again soon.